Dr. Shin's journey from a small town in Korea to becoming a renowned researcher and educator exemplifies his commitment to making a real-world impact. With expertise in demand forecasting, information technologies, and supply chain management, his work addresses critical challenges such as drug shortages and movie release strategies, earning him the prestigious Best Paper Award at the CIST Conference in 2012. A dedicated educator, Dr. Shin has been honored with numerous teaching accolades, including the Chair's Core Course Teaching Award at Kellogg, a Distinguished Teaching Award, 11 Excellence in Teaching Awards, and 5 Most Valuable Professor Awards at UC San Diego's Rady School of Management. Keep listening to learn more about Dr. Shin's story, from earning a PhD at Stanford to inspiring future leaders at one of the top public universities, and his dream of making a lasting impact through supply chain education, research, and application.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Learning from Real Life Stories. I'm Helen Wang, founder and CEO of Oceanside Perspective, a nonprofit educational platform. If you're new here, welcome to our community. If you're a returning member, welcome home. Today, we have a truly remarkable guest. How often do you meet someone who has won a distinguished teaching award, 11 Excellence in Teaching Awards, and 5 Most Valuable Professor Awards? How often do you come across a researcher and an educator who dreams big, thinks big, and acts big? I'm incredibly grateful to know someone like this. Please meet with today's guest speaker, Dr. Hyoduk Shin from the Rady School of Management at the University of California, San Diego. Dr. Shin, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hello, everyone. This is really my great honor to be part of Oceanside Perspective family. Working with Helen has been my joy, my life. And I'm an educator and a researcher at UC San Diego. And I'm looking forward to having more conversation with Helen in this episode.
Yeah, Dr. Shin, you are a very special guest in many ways, but one of the things I thought distinguish you from other guests that I normally have is because I have my past corporate life, right? And I invite a lot of people from industry, to share their stories and share their intelligence with us. But you are actually the one that I met. If not the first one, you might be the first one that I met at the University of California, San Diego. So it's kind of my second, half of my career that when I started the teaching and all that. So I'm always grateful, for opportunity to learn from you.
The feelings are mutual. It has been definitely my joy as well to work with you, Helen.
Yeah. So one of our students actually at Rady drafted a lot of questions that she is interested to ask you. But she couldn't be here today. So I thought I would just do a hybrid, some of the question coming from her and some of the question coming from me. We looking forward just to have a good conversation here.
Sounds good.
The first question, I thought it was a beautiful question that she wants to know. Dr. Shin, please share a little bit about your life story and how it shaped your personality and a career path.
Oh, that's an interesting question. Whenever I think about my life story, on the one hand, it feels good, but on the other hand, it feels very bad because when I look back, all of a sudden it comes to me that, oops, I'm really old, 50 years old, looking back, wow, already 30 years passed since I graduated my university. So I will say in terms of my life, the big part of my personality and the life is actually when I was young, right? When I was young, when the place that I grew up, when I was a kid, it was a very rural area. It was back in Korea. Also very small community. Everyone knows everyone else. And also sort of the philosophy of working hard and being modest. That has been, I will say, in my blood. Maybe consciously or unconsciously, I am to some extent brainwashed by that, right? So I think that shaped my personality quite a bit. also, I will say, one thing that my friend told me after I graduated the university, we were high school friends, but he chose to go to other university. And he mentioned that after 4 years, hey, Shin, I see that you changed. And I said, well, I mean, what do you mean? I changed. I just finished the university. And he told me now in the university, I studied engineering. And he said, now you talk like an engineer, right? So that 4 year sort of a study in my 20s in undergrad, that also, I believe, shaped the way that I see the world. So probably those are the major drivers of forming my personality and characteristics.
Just put things in context. When you see it's a small hometown, like how many people, how household is there?
That's also another interesting question. So it used to be about 200 households, meaning if each household has, let's say, 4 families, you can say less than 1,000 people when I was young. But the interesting part of it is the whole town, I will say about a 25% of the population in the town were the wives of Shins, and the rest were basically the Shins, right? My last name is Shin, and the whole town is more like a Shin family town, right? Definitely around our house, it was my relatives, but even not just around the house, the whole town, I am sure it's if I go up to my grandfathers, everyone is basically uncles and aunts. So that was my hometown. Although it's in the mountains, it's very rural countryside, um, but it's also getting old or older now. One story that I used to say is when my mom got married, people used to call her, hey, newly married, right? So she was the newly married when she just get married. But then she was newly married up until basically right before she died. Even then, she was the newly married because after her, there was no one else, right? So the whole town became really, really old.
Wow, that's very interesting. So if I happen to be in your town, I say I'm looking for Dr. Shin. Are you the only Dr. Shin? Or there's others?
There are a few others, but I am sure that because, as I said, everyone knows everyone else. If you ask, where is Shin being Hyoduk Shin, I am sure everyone knows. Not because it's me, but everyone knows everyone else.
What about Professor Shin?
I know there's one other professor in my hometown. Used to be about 20 years older than me, that people used to call. So I
Wow,
remember that.
that feels really, really special. Yeah. A town is like a big family,
A
right?
big family, really a
Yeah,
big
yeah.
family. Right.
So coming from there, what was your biggest dream when you were a child? What do you want it to be?
So actually, when I was a child, even when being in elementary school, middle school, or even at high school, my dream was actually being an astronaut.
Oh, wow.
So I still love to watch skies, stars, but my dream was actually being an astronaut. That was my dream. Lots of comics. Yeah, I just love space.
I see a boy from a small village, but dreams big, become
Yes,
an astronaut. And
yes.
I'm sure you settled somehow in between.
Between the ground and the rural town and the space, somewhere in between.
Yeah, so that leads to the next question, why would you choose to study abroad and become a professor? What inspires you?
That's also a great question. So study abroad came, I just thought it was a next step, right? So what happened in my life is I started my school, my elementary school in my small countryside rural area, and then we moved to a bigger city for my middle school. and then which is called Daegu, which is actually one of the big 5 cities in Korea. And then I went to the university. So that was middle school and high school there for 5 years. And I went to the university, which is also another big city in Korea. And then I went to graduate school, which was in Seoul. So to me, every 4 or 5 years, I thought it was like a promotion, right? You go to the middle and high school, you go to the university, you go to the graduate school, now at Seoul, and now I'm stuck with there's nowhere else to go than, other than the outside of Korea. So that came sort of naturally to me. Another one that also helped me, I will say, is after graduate school, I went to serve in the military. And before that, my thinking was actually continue to study in Korea to the PhD program in Korea, because my viewpoint was very narrow then. But when I was serving in the military, all of a sudden, well, I didn't study. So in terms of the depth or the knowledge, it didn't go deeper, but it became much, much wider. I saw, sort of the whole world. There are quite a few other things than the university and others, right? So that enlightened me to some extent. That also encouraged me to, look wider, and that pushed me to actually go outside of Korea and study in the state. Being a professor, that was, I will say, not much of a decision because I remember once I got admitted to a PhD program at Stanford. Now maybe it's a little bit different, but at that time, business school PhD means after you get the degree, you will get a job in the university as a professor, right? So that it just came very natural.
I learned a lot from you in terms of teaching. So I'm curious about how would you describe your teaching style, and why is that a particular choice?
So teaching, to me, it's almost like an event, right? Because on the one hand, the key role of teaching is conveying knowledge, right? But at the same time, if it is only about conveying knowledge, I can say anyone can do, right? And I'm sure, if you look at Coursera, there are great contents about conveying knowledge. However, to me, teaching is more than that. Right? Teaching is more than just conveying knowledge. I will add, in addition to conveying knowledge, also it is inspiring people, right? And with that, I think in order to inspire people, I believe that it's also very important to convey the enthusiasm about the field, about the domain of the knowledge, right? Which I love. I love what I teach. I love what I study. So for that, I think about a lot how to convey, not only what to convey, but how to convey. And I think that matters, right? And also, teaching to me is very not only rewarding, but it's a lot of fun. I love it. It's one of the few times that actually students, they care and they listen, right? It's these days I get less and less people listening me. So at least at teaching, they care and they listen. And I find it surprisingly, it's a lot of fun.
When did you realize that you're actually really good at that? I mean, just to remind our audience, right? All the awards that when I opened this episode, you have won. I mean, that's just amazing. Like, so at which point that you realized actually this is something you're really good and enjoy and having fun?
I have to confess, I still don't think I don't know whether I'm good, but at least I know that I'm enjoying and it's fun. And even to me, it was a big surprise. Eh, the first time that I taught, that I really taught, was actually after I got a job at Kellogg in Northwestern University, right? And I did some sort of a teaching assistant roles when I was a grad student, but that's different. That I won't call that as a real teaching. The real teaching that I have done was the summer of 2009 and in Chicago campus on Tuesday evening class of operations. And given that that was the evening class, the students were also quite intimidating. Some of them were much older than me then. Some, I still remember, there was actually a full professor from Northwestern Medical School. Many of them were directors in the big companies. So I was a little bit intimidated. But at the same time, the great advice that I had related to teaching was Sunil Kumar. He actually told me, hey, Shin, for your first teaching, overinvest, right? My poor wife had to endure so many times with my boring lecture. I practiced quite a bit. That part of preparing teaching, I didn't enjoy as much, but being on stage and teaching, it was very exhausting, but at the same time, surprisingly, I found it really fun. And also later, I realized when I received the teaching evaluations from students, it was also really good. So I was like, this is interesting. Who knew that I knew I have to do research and whatnot, but teaching part was, honestly speaking, it was a big surprise. I realized that even in my teaching, that in my first teaching, that wow, this is something which can be really fun.
So one question our student asked was, teaching require very effective communication, right? So what are some of the key factors you think are helpful?
So one key part I will say is saying less, right? And listening more. But at the same time, I will also say for teaching, still, as a teacher, I am still the host of this show, right? Meaning I should know inside out where I want to go and which part I should cut and which part I should push more, right? So although I am listening more, it's not just let the student talk as long as they want. It's about actually where to cut and when to ask more questions so that I can push the discussion to the direction that I want. So that's, I think, one important one. And also, oftentimes, listening also means being open, right? At this point, I see it may not come very often, but sometimes some great discussions that I didn't expect also come. Always be sort of a very open to that and very careful on catching those and then pushing further. So I think those are, to me, two important sort of skill sets for effective teaching.
Well, those are amazing, actually, tips that I guess it makes a lot of sense because you gather a lot of more information, right? You can actively listen and guide the conversation. So from that standpoint, those key factors that you shared is not only applied to teaching, is applied to like as a good communicator in general.
Yes, right. I think
Yeah.
so. I think so.
Just for our audience to know, what exactly do you teach? And when you say like passion and having fun and you really love what you do, tell us what exactly you teach.
Great question. So I teach operations, which is about how to get things done in an organization. And also I teach supply chain management. Before COVID, I should explain what supply chain is. But after COVID, all of a sudden, everyone knows. So I teach that supply chain management, supply chain risk management. Also, we have a master's in business analytics program. In that program, I teach supply chain analytics, which is the concept is about supply chain management, but we blend with a lot of data analytics and the use of data analytics in supply chain management.
I have to say, coming from the industry, been doing supply chain for my entire professional career in the corporate. I mean, those are such a hard topic to make it fun.
One thing good about operations and supply chain is it's tangible, right? It might be boring, but still it's tangible and lots of things that we can relate to. So that's one part that I love.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you want to give us an example? How do you get a student interested in operation and supply chain? Why is that relatable to them? It might feel relatable to us, but actually most of the people is like, what do you mean operation? What do you mean supply chain? Why does that matter to me, right?
I see. So for example, when I teach operations, I bring a lot of examples, day-to-day life examples. And that reminds me, actually, last week I was teaching operations analytics, and one example that we talked was actually a coffee shop at the ski slope, right? If you look at the coffee shop at the ski slope, I showed in class exactly the menu, right? At the Big Bear coffee shop, right very close to the summit slope. And if you look at the menu, first thing that everyone will recognize is everything is very expensive. Coffee at $5 and lattes at $6, everything's expensive. And although everything is expensive, because it's very close to the slope at the ski season, there's always long line. So I told students, I am sure some of you will recognize this ski slope and also this coffee shop, and you will see the menu here, and I will say something's wrong with the menu, right? And some students can then, okay, I know that ski slope, I know that coffee shop, I know the menu. Menu's expensive, but I didn't, pay that much focus on it. I didn't pay much attention to it. But if you think about it, there is something strange. And I say to students, I can immediately make them make much more money than they are currently making not by adding much, but by deleting it, right? And students start thinking about it. And then I told them, by the way, I thought they already figured it out, because while I was waiting in line in that coffee shop, they announced and then said, hey, folks in the line, sorry about the inconvenience. Actually, our latte machine is broken, right? Now, all you can have is either coffee or tea, right? And I said, they were lying. You should know they were lying. Why they were lying? Because, hey, although latte might be higher margin, it takes too long. So instead of selling those lattes, they are now just selling coffees, which might be a smaller margin, but they can actually make much more sort of money faster, right? And bringing those examples, I think students can relate to, will help them understand and also help them to think and apply what they learn in class to the real life.
That's excellent. Yeah, I can already see myself in your class. That's wonderful. We have a lot of technology also coming into education, right? And it's inevitable question that I would like to ask is AI in education. So where we are now, where do you see we're getting in the future?
That's also a great question. It's a much bigger question. I will also admit that this is just one person's opinion, right? I see that first, in terms of education, I will emphasize that what we teach should be also changed, right? Meaning, if we look at what AI can do, in terms of, let's say, just solving problems, it can do a lot of stuff, right? Even better than some students, I will say, right? However, if we see what it was doing, it is mostly pattern matching. Okay, if this is the pattern, we'll just match. So I believe that what we should teach is now, to some extent, it's going back in time, right? The more fundamental stuff, the way how to think, right? Not just, okay, this is the equation, but instead of that, how to think. That I think is the key, how to critically think, right? That I don't think AI can replace us. So that's what I think. But at the same time, I will also emphasize, and I do that in class as well, I encourage students to use AI. Writing reports, yes, students can do that, but if AI can do better, why not use it, right? So that way also, the education itself should change to adapt.
Is there a clear guidance among different universities or education in general? Like how much we should empower AI or utilize AI in education? How much we should insist, having the students to learn and practice?
That's a good question. So my understanding is we are at the point in which we are in the process of establishing a rule, meaning as of now, I don't see any uniform rules. Not only across universities, but even within university, I don't see a uniform rule yet, right? It's as of now, it's up to each professor. Some professors will no, some professors will say feel free, right? My thinking is, although this is just a university, but once the students go out to industry, it's there. It's technology and it's a tool. If it helps, why not? Right? So in that sense, to me, take it as a tool, but always don't lose focus on what we do, right? Education itself is not just teaching them how to use the tool, right? Education should be teaching students on how to think. Right? So in that sense, there are many tools. AI is one of them, but we shouldn't lose focus on what we teach to students.
Yeah, the booming of AI, right, kind of accelerated by ChatGPT happened about 2+ years ago.
Yes.
So for this generation or across generation, that what we have experienced is doesn't matter my generation, your generation, the younger generation, they have already learned a lot. They graduate elementary school, graduate middle school, high school, university, so on and so forth. I wonder how soon or how early should we embrace AI in education?
That's a big question. So I think it's just a matter of time, and how soon, the sooner the better. That's my thinking, right? Especially in business school. It's already, I mean, some business is already utilizing it left and right. So, the way that I'm thinking is in industry, there is already companies using AI for their advantage. If we don't educate the students about how to use those tools in a better way, the competition is still there in the industry. So I don't think it's a choice, right?
But the question about how early, I can understand like graduate students or university students because those students has gone through some basic education. But what about, let's say kindergarten, elementary, middle school, high school? Like when is the right point to introduce AI, not to stop them from learning, right? Like the fundamental learning skill we talked about earlier. But at the same time, we cannot really push back on the evolution of technology. It's just like internet. It's just like, the iPhone, the iPad era, right? So I'm wondering about the balance.
I see. That's very challenging question. And I will say, I don't know the answer. But my thought is this. As I said, my thinking is AI is a tool, right? My analogy is think about calculator, right? Calculator will do a lot of calculations, but it is definitely not the case that, hey, calculator can do the calculation much better than human. So for the kindergarten, there's no need to teach what is 1 + 1 = 2, right? And no, we still teach them, right? We still teach the kindergartners how to do addition, subtraction. Again, although there is a tool that can do much better than human being. So for example, AI, I will say, especially for ChatGPT, it's extremely good at writing, right? If we just prompt a few words and then ask a paragraph or two, ChatGPT can do a really excellent job on that. But that doesn't mean I will say, hey, we will educate our kindergartners to, you don't have to write. You just add these, prompt to ChatGPT to write a paragraph and ChatGPT will spit a nice paragraph. I don't think so, right? I don't think we should do that. We should still teach kindergartners or elementary school how to write and how to form your thoughts. But I am worried though. But I'm worried because kindergartners and elementary, especially elementary school students, they are exposed to the technology.
And they're
in
also
my
very
opinion,
tech savvy.
Too much, right?
Yeah, and they're smart. They're very tech savvy. They
Exactly.
probably figure out something faster than we do when we were at that age.
Exactly. It's very scary. But who knows? I might be wrong, right? I might be wrong that, okay, now the definition of writing may change. The definition of writing may be, that writing means ChatGPT prompting. Maybe in the future it may be. But again, in my opinion, though, we should still teach kids how to write.
Mm-hmm. As a professor, you spend some time teaching, some time research, right? How much time do you actually spend on research in the UC system?
In the UC system, so I will say still majority of my time, definitely over maybe 60, 70% time in research. Most of the time, research, a big portion of research is actually about writing, right? And also reading papers, reading others' papers, understanding what are their arguments, and also talking about my paper to others to get their feedback, right? So definitely substantial time in research, probably well over 50%.
So what's your view about AI in research? What's the impact there?
That's also a great question. But in research, I will say it's less so, right? Less so because writing part, I also use AI quite a bit, ChatGPT quite a bit, pretty much every time, right? But for research, for example, I need to create a analysis or I need to create a table, using those empirical data. I'll do the analysis. I have a table that I can ask AI to do it, but I have to tell AI what to do. Right? So the research part, I am less worried about the impact of AI. Still, creation of the new content, it's in the area of human beings, at least for now.
Mm-hmm. What are some the area that you're interested in research? We might have audience that who might be interested to know more and may potentially even potential research project. Who knows? So what are those areas?
Great question. So one, I'm definitely very interested in the supply chain area, in particular, the impact of technologies in the supply chain area. But I will also add, recently I ventured into the area of healthcare industry. I always thought this industry is too complicated. Also, it has a lot of inefficiency, which means there are quite a big room for improvement. So I recently had a few papers on drug shortages, and I just started a project with a PhD student um, in terms of AI application in the hospitals. We'll see where it goes, but that's one area that I'm also excited.
Let's talk about supply chain.
Mhm.
Very close to both of us. And
Mhm.
where do you see the trend happening in supply chain, whether it's technology evolution or AI impact? What's your viewpoint about supply chain in relation to technology?
I think it is one of those trends, in my opinion, right? Um, it will help improve a efficiency or effectiveness quite a bit. Um, for example, there used to be a work that a 10-person can do in a month. And now with the help of I am sure maybe it will become that we only need one person just for one day, right? But interestingly, though, that doesn't mean that, okay, which means then we will just work one day instead of 1 month and we'll take the remaining 29 days off. No, right? At least that's not the way that I see the world evolved, right? As long as there were more innovations and more efficiency gains, I am sure that will also create more work, unfortunately, right? So AI will help a lot in supply chain in terms of efficiency gains, but at the same time, that will also create a lot of new work, right? And people's expectation will get higher, and that will definitely create more opportunities for supply chain.
What do you think the current pain points are for most of the company when it comes to supply chain?
That's a great question. So to me, this one is not about technology, but it's just the perception or maybe the standpoint of supply chain, which is for some companies, supply chain is like an insurance, meaning if everything works well, nobody cares, right? If supply chain works well and everything works smoothly, then nobody cares. However, if there is a problem, then okay, now what's going on? And I think it's good. It's but at the same time, one thing that I don't like about that approach is that I want supply chain to be a consideration of even something bigger, not just even when something works very well. I want supply chain to take a role on, hey, we can make it even better, right? Not just, oh, okay, something breaks and then now we have to work. But even when something works well, I want people to push the supply chain further to get even better. Uh, Also on the financial side, not only on saving costs, but hey, by pushing the supply chain further, we can actually generate or free cash, or even sometimes generating more cash or generating more revenues, right? So probably there could be some companies already thinking that direction, but I hope that supply chain will be in that consideration set of creating more revenues or improvements, even when things work well.
Yeah. Do you think it may be because if it's a for-profit business, right, the focus is really on profitability?
That's what it is. But supply chain can still, even with that focus on more profit, higher profit, supply chain should and can contribute on the top line, right? Not only on reducing the bottom line, but we should definitely think about the top line as well. That's one thing that I hope it will happen more.
So in that context, what do you think school could do? Like in terms of incubating the future talents, what skills the student might need to acquire or enhance in order to get there? More of a conversation at the company top line, generating more profit in addition to the bottom line protection.
Also a great question. To me, then, in terms of educating supply chain talent, we should definitely focus not only on the specific roles of the supply chain, but how supply chain interacts with other functional areas, right? How supply chain can work with the marketing to create even more values for marketing. How can supply chain contribute to the finance, right? By interfacing more with how the finance works, and what will be the impact of, let's say, reducing the inventories on the financials and whatnot, right? So in terms of education or educating future talent, I think it's important to give them a bigger perspective on where the supply chain sits in the overall corporate structure, and how to, in the end, we don't want to just improve the supply chain. We want to improve the whole company. So that view of more holistic view, educating that view, I think, is critical.
Do you see any difference in terms of if we view generation as a personality? How do you communicate with them? How do you motivate them? How do you inspire them? Do you see any change from time, from all those years that you're teaching?
I see actually these days more direct on the student perspective, meaning this can be good or bad, meaning in the past, there is one point of at school, in my class, in the class, there is one component of learning, right? I want to learn, right? And there's another component, which is in the end, I'm here at school. Why? Because after graduate, I want to get a job, right? And I see more emphasis on the second component. In the past, I see a little bit more on the learning side. So students come to class and they say, okay, I want to learn. And now still, I'm not saying there's no such component of learning. Still, there are lots of students who are more interested in learning. But at the same time, the direction that I see in terms of trend is more students are concerned on, okay, whatever I learn, my goal, how can I get a job, right? So I see more students directly asking that question about, okay, whatever we learn, how can I get a job, right? So it can be good. It can be good in terms of students' priority and students' perspective. But I see that as one trend, that these days more students focused on the sort of a getting a job perspective.
So as an educator, what do you think? When you see the trend, what's the best practice, in terms of how do we become more effective educator? What are some of advice that you may have?
So to me, I have no issue with that, right? So to me, actually, it might be learning is definitely important. But I tell students, get your priority right. This, especially if it's undergrad, then it's a different story, right? Undergrad students, you come and you learn, right? You learn not only the knowledge itself, but as a human, you also learn how to learn, right? All that's the key for undergraduate program. It's a key education. But in professional programs like MBAs, it's different. Yes, you learn, but at the same time, why? What is your focus, right? And honestly think they should focus what is their ultimate goal. They should prioritize. And we should also, as an educator of those professional programs, we should also, to some extent, kind of accommodate that. right? That's why they gave up their 2 years of their time, their precious time, to come to school. And their priority, a big priority, is what happens after school to get a job and to their advance of career. So we should definitely take that aspect more seriously, even as an educator's perspective.
What do you think triggered that change?
Probably some part is the economy, I will say, right? I saw, especially these days, getting a job is getting tougher. That's part of it. And also, maybe it's just that the perception of time seems to be kind of more shrunk, right? In the past, maybe people are more patient, maybe. They think about more of a long game. But now, probably students are less sort of patient, more anxious. And getting a job part, I get it, but at the same time, it's not about getting a job and what happens in 10 years. It's about getting a job tomorrow, right? That part I'm actually slightly worried about, right? You have to think about a little bit longer. But I see students much more anxious about tomorrow. I need to get a job, right? So maybe the impact of technology.
Yeah, so as in one of the international students yourself, many years ago, what advice would you give to those international students coming to the US for study?
To me, my big advice especially for international students, I will say, do it, right? Whatever you think, do it. This is actually an opportunity to, this is a new world, right? Use it in your advantage, meaning you can do crazy stuff and you can say, hey, because it's a new world, I try new things, right? Especially in the state, if you don't do anything, nothing happens. So you have to do something, and always just show yourself, do it, make a mistake, right? I think especially at school, that's okay. That's one advice that I will give. And also try new things, just like teaching, just like, if I didn't try, I didn't know, right? I wouldn't have known it. So try some new things. There might be surprises, right? Some good surprises.
To follow up on the conversation you just had about the differences you observed in the generations, I'm wondering, because you shared some of your story, you think you're very lucky, to get those opportunities. You thought about it, your dream to grow up, but reality actually lead you to a different path. So, whether it's a study, whether it's something we encountered in our life, it's actually cannot really be all organized and planned, because life is full of surprises. Yeah. So in terms of I'm doing this, I'm at a point A, and if I study for 2 years, I wanted to be there. I just feel like that's just, that might happen for some people, but for most of us, it didn't happen that way. All we can do is work hard, learn as much as we could, right? Try new things and hope that opportunities will be down the road somewhere waiting for us. I also sensed a little bit about lack of patience, right? Much faster pace and target oriented. It's like objective. This is what I wanted to do. I must go there. So I maybe the life is just changing.
Right. I totally agree, right? I totally agree. Yes, we have to plan and we have to prioritize, but always you have to embrace there are some things that's not under our control. And actually, there are a lot of things that's not under control, that is not under our control. And, in the end, it's okay, such as life, right? So we shouldn't expect exactly things will happen the way that we imagine, right? I am sure in most cases it's not. And still, it's life, and still we can enjoy, right? So whatever happens, we should also enjoy.
So here comes two questions that our student wants to ask. For individuals considering advanced study or international experiences, what advice would you offer to maximize the potential and career prospects?
So two questions, right? Advanced degrees and studying abroad. I will say try first, but at the same time, don't constrain yourself only to that route. Because I still remember in one of the conference, I was invited as a panelist for this academic job, right? In front of about 40 PhD students. And there was one professor, actually he graduated from Harvard and then he got a job at Harvard. And he was saying, hey, this job is the best in the world, right? And I told PhD students then, the job that I have, I love it. But at the same time, let's be honest, I look at you, 40 PhD students, I don't see anyone from Harvard. It is very unlikely that, many of you will get a job at a tenured professor at Harvard. Personally, as I said, I like this job, but I cannot say this is the best job because I just haven't experienced any other jobs in industry other than, a few years in the bank. So I don't know, right? But clearly this is a good job. So what I told them is, hey, you do PhD, but at the same time, don't think of this, the end of the story. There are other worlds out there. Don't constrain yourself only in the PhD and, getting a job in academia. Explore, right? Explore. Who knows? There might be better opportunities out there too. So that's one thing I will say. Whatever you do, enjoy, but at the same time, be open and always don't constrain yourself only in, okay, this is what I do and that's it, right? And if I don't get this is the end of my world. No, there's definitely other words and even better words out there. So don't constrain yourself. And take it also more of the learning opportunity. Now, studying abroad part, I always encourage, especially to international students, when they ask what to do, especially before joining the school, I tell them, hey, read newspapers, right? Read Wall Street Journal, read New York Times every day, right? Immerse yourself not only at school, but to this sort of a culture, to this business environment, right? I think that's also a very helpful and a lot of learning by doing so as well.
What about for professionals and students who would like to pivot to supply chain and operation as profession? What advice would you give them?
One thing is supply chain is a very interesting area, right? So it's a lot of problem solving. It's exciting. So when you want to change, give everything that you have in the field of supply chain. It'll be interesting. But also don't constrain yourself only in the area of supply chain. What I would recommend is you can be sales, you can be supply chain. Those don't think of it as those are two different things, right? In the end, it's what people do. This is one part of business. This is another part of business. If you have some experience in supply chain, I will even recommend, hey, why don't you get maybe also a little bit of a different experience in the other field, right? And I still remember it was Rowan, right, who was the COO of Qualcomm. What you need is not only the depth, right, 10 years depth of experience in one area, it could be supply chain, but in industry, after that, what you also need another 10 years of a width, right, in experience in all the other parts. You may not have a depth, but at least you need to know what's going on. As supply chain becomes your area of depth, that's great, but it's absolutely okay if the supply chain becomes one of the areas in your width, right? The bottom line is either way, you need to know something about supply chain. So I will recommend, just take learning more importantly, more seriously than just one area. Right? If you're in supply chain, if you're interested, I am sure there are tons of things to learn, tons of interesting things to learn. Enjoy that and learn that. But at the same time, just don't constrain yourself only in that area.
Yeah, I like what you just said. It seems like a successful shape for your career. It's like a T, right?
Exactly.
So you grow at depth, and then you also need this width in order
Exactly.
to have that balance.
Perfect. Yes. Yes. Very
Yeah,
well said. Mhm.
yeah, that's great. So Dr. Shin, what is your next big dream?
Oh, that's a great question. So my next big dream is at this point, I would love to have a impact, right? Impact meaning in the end, going back to our first talking point, life is short and we are getting old, and I am still kind of thinking, okay, what will make me like happy or content on my deathbed, right? Okay, I have done my job. It was a good life, right? I'm keep thinking about that, and one thing is at least I made an impact. It could be made an impact on people, it could be made an impact on the field, but either way, I would love to have that. I would love to have that. Okay, that feeling of okay, I made an impact, and that's what I'm trying to achieve in my next big thing, right? Can I contribute and make an impact potentially in the field? Could be supply chain, could be healthcare, at least in one field.
Mhm. So in other words, I'm going to ask you a similar question, but maybe a different angle is,
Mhm.
what do you want your legacy to be? And
Uh,
how do you hope to achieve it?
for my legacy, I will say, to be modest, at least I was not the person who made a negative impact. Hopefully, it was something positive. Be memorized as a humble, good person, made a little bit of a dent in the field, a positive dent in the field. That I will take it as an achievement or my legacy.
Great. I asked the next question to every guest. So I'm curious about your answer. Think of your life as a house. Can you knock down the wall between the rooms and be the same person in each one? Why and why not?
I would love to be the same person, right? I would love to be same person because in the end, it's me. I am myself, right? My role is different depending on which role that I'm playing, but in the end, it's me. So I am not saying it will be, but rather I'm saying I want to be, right? Um, so for sometimes I could be remembered a little bit differently depending on people. I know, especially these days with the limited time, I try to sort of limit myself in some cases that inevitably comes to some people. It may be like, ooh, Shin is not very generous on his time, right? But I try my best to be myself, even in a different roles.
So here comes my last question. What
Mhm.
advice would you give it to your generation and the younger generation?
To my generation, I have nothing to say. I see many more impactful people in my generation, so I will refrain from that advice. The younger generation, I'm just looking sort of especially my daughter's sort of generation. This is what I regret, and this is what I used to say to my daughter, right? Which is, don't think that one thing that you do or what you do is such an important thing. I will say in the end, there are not many, important things. There aren't many important things in life to some extent, meaning anyway, we all die. So, you think this is really important? Probably not, right? Probably not. So for the younger generation, one thing that I recommend that I tell my daughter quite many times is, especially now that she's at school, they focus a lot on education. They focus a lot on, studying. I told her, don't worry too much, at least for those. My recommendation would be you should act more and try to think big if possible. Think big meaning not like, oh, I'll be the best programmer in the world. No, right? My dream would be think big meaning, be a politician. That's my dream. I think rewarding could be, or making an impact. That's one field, that's one area that I see people hate, but at the same time, it's important, right? I hope the next generation, my daughter's generation, can make a better society, right? People will not hate politics. People will embrace politics, and through politics also, they will be able to make a better society at least. Right? That's and whatever else that they think it's really important, I am sure after 20, 30, 40 years, they will realize, no, that's not as important as they thought.
Just so our audience know, how old is your daughter now?
She's 12.
12. So it could be a future US president.
Oh, I hope so.
Dr. Shin, this is a wonderful conversation. I would say this, it takes a big heart to help shape little minds, the little minds like your daughters. If you would have, I love this quote is life is a book and we are all author of our own book. If you were to give a title or name for your book, what would that be?
I came and I enjoyed. Hopefully I didn't do no harm. I didn't do any harm.
Dr. Shin, thank you for sharing your journey with us today. We wish you continued success as you write your next chapter, including the big dream has more impact for the society. As we conclude, I wanted to also remind everyone of Oceanside Perspectives' mission to ignite diverse perspectives from authentic voices across generations. And thank you again, Dr. Shin, for spending time with us today.
Thank you so much, Helen. And thank you everyone for listening into. Good luck and best luck to your life.
I hope this episode inspired you to dream big with hope, think big with open mind, and act big with courage. If you find our content valuable, we invite you to share your thoughts with us and share it with your network. Thank you for spending time with us today, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Helen.
Thanks for listening to Oceanside Chat. We hope you enjoyed this conversation. If you liked it, please share our podcast and stay tuned for more episodes. We'll see you later.